one of the most exciting exercises for a writer to do, particularly an emerging writer, is not to try to write a whole short story or a conventional story. Write a miniature narrative. This can be one paragraph long. It could be a page long. So a miniature narrative takes place very quickly. It's like a poem. Robert Frost defined lyric poetry as the melting of ice on a hot stove. You have the ice and the stove, and the ice melts, and that's the poem. And when it's over, it's over. It's going to take place in 2 minutes. If you can tell a story as briefly as possible, it's more dramatic. If it's too long, then it has the problems of pacing. It could get a little slow. But the shorter you can make a story, the better. If you don't have time for characters, you have time for an incident or an event or something that happens. So I try to get my students always to work in short forms and work up to longer forms, and then not start on a longer form immediately. The use of force takes place in about 5 minutes. It's a brilliant and wonderful, memorable story, probably the best thing that William Carlos Williams wrote in prose. He was a distinguished poet. Now, William Carlos Williams was a doctor. He lived in Paterson, New Jersey. He was a doctor who had many patients who were very poor. Now, in those days, a doctor would go out to people's houses. He didn't just wait in his office. Dr. Williams would go out to many poor people. He went out to people who didn't speak English in Paterson, New Jersey. So this story is about something, I'm sure this happened. He would come back from work at the end of a day, totally exhausted. He would go up to his attic. He had a manual typewriter, and he would tap out, maybe with 2 fingers, he would tap out as fast as he could write something that happened to him. So this brilliant story, obviously based on what happened to him one day. Now, as a work of art, he may have revised it, he may have added to it, but basically the beginning, the middle, what happens in the end is all based on something that happened. So the use of force is the title he gives this experience. So he says, "They were new patients to me. All I had was the name Olson. Please come down as soon as you can. My daughter is very sick." There's no quotation marks. The dialogue is all very rapidly remembered. When I arrived, I was met by the mother, a big startled-looking woman, very clean and apologetic, who said, "Is this a doctor?" and let me in. In the back, she added, "You must excuse us, doctor. We have her in the kitchen where it's warm, very damp here sometimes." So here we have a child who's sitting in her father's lap, and there's something wrong with her, and she doesn't want to open her mouth to have her throat examined. And the child sits there staring at the doctor, and the doctor tries to get her to open her mouth so he can check her throat. "Well," I said, "suppose we have a look at the throat." I smiled in my best professional manner, asked for the child's first name. I said, "Come on, Matilda, open your mouth. Let's take a look at your throat." Nothing doing. "Oh, come on." I said, "Open your mouth and let me take a look." Opening my hands. "I haven't got anything in my hands." "Such a nice man," put in the mother. "Look how kind he is to you." "Come on, do what he tells you to you. He won't hurt you," said the mother. At that, I ground my teeth in disgust. If only they wouldn't use the word hurt, I might be able to get somewhere. But I didn't allow myself to be hurried or disturbed, but speaking quietly and slowly, I approached the child. He moves his chair a little closer. But then, as she gets close to her, this little girl claws at his eye. She's going to attack him. She doesn't want to be examined. She knocks his glasses off. And the mother says, "Oh, you bad girl," and shaking her. "For heaven's sake," I broke in, "don't call me a nice man. I'm here to look on the throat on a chance she might have diphtheria and possibly die of it. But look," I said to the child, "we're going to look at your throat. You're old enough to understand what I'm saying. Will you open it by yourself now, or shall we have to open it for you?" So now that's getting to be like the use of force. The story starts where maybe the child will cooperate, but now the child's not cooperating. Okay, the battle began. I had to have a throat culture for her protection. I explained the danger, and the mother says, if you don't do what the doctor says, you have to go to the hospital. The mother admonished her severely. Oh, yeah, I had to smile to myself. After all, I had already fallen in love with the savage brat. So this is such a strange thing for the doctor to say. He really loves this little girl because she's so rebellious. And the parents were contemptible to me. In the ensuing struggle, they grew more and more abject, while she rose to magnificent heights of insane fury of effort, born of her terror of me. So they're trying to hold this child, and they hold her wrists, and he's got to get a culture of her throat. The child's screaming, and she's kicking. And the whole family now is holding her, and the doctor has this wooden tongue depressor between her teeth. She fought, and I had grown furious at a child. I tried to hold myself down, but I couldn't. I know how to expose a throat for inspection. I did my best. I finally got the wooden spatula behind the last teeth and at a point into the mouth cavity. She opened up for an instant, and then she came down and gripped the wooden blade between her molars. She reduced it to splinters before I could stop it. In other words, she sabotaged it. So the doctor says, get me a smooth-handled spoon of some kind. We're going through with this. The child's mouth was already bleeding. Her tongue was cut. She was screaming hysterically. Perhaps I should have desisted and come back in an hour or more. No doubt it might have been better. But I'd seen at least 2 children dying in bed of neglect in such cases, and feeling that I must get a diagnosis now or never, I went at it again. But the worst of it was that I too had gotten beyond reason. I could have torn the child apart in my own fury and enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to attack her. My face was burning with it, which today sounds like a rape or a child abuse. It sounds like something really pushing a taboo. And at the time that he wrote it was also very, very revealing and shocking. The doctor's trying to say that in the interest of saving the daughter and preventing this diphtheria, which is contagious, he does something that he finds very disgusting to himself, but he felt he had to do it. The damned little brat must be protected against her own idiocy, one says to oneself at such times. Others must be protected to her. All these things are true, but a blind fury, a feeling of adult shame, bred of longing for muscular release are the operatives. One goes on to the end. In the final unreasoning assault, I overpowered the child's neck and jaws, forced the heavy spoon back of her teeth, and down her throat until she gagged. And there it was, both tonsils covered with membrane. She had fought valiantly to keep her from knowing her secret. She had been hiding this sore throat for 3 days and lying to her parents in order to escape just an outcome of this. She tried to get off her father's lap and fly at me with tears of defeat blinding her eyes. That's the end of the story. It's a story that is very surprising because first it just seems like he's telling a story of something that happened with some patients. But then it comes to be, well, that's like the whole medical profession or a male doctor forcing himself on a female child. So it becomes something much more dark and universal. With a miniature narrative, if there's any dialogue, it's probably just as well not to have quotation marks and have everything in the text. In other words, William Carlos Williams says, they were new patients to me, comma, all I had was the name Olson, period. Please come down as soon as you can, my daughter's very sick. In other words, that's dialogue, but it's not set off. It's basically just part of the text. So it's rapid writing. It's as if you were remembering something that you dreamt that's very, very rapid. And rather than putting it out and making it very formal and sort of diagrammatic, having it almost blurred and impressionistic, to try for an impressionistic effect. And using language that doesn't call attention to itself, just very simple language. The form of William Carlos Williams, the use of force, it's almost like a sonnet form. You have a beginning, you have a middle, and you have a powerful ending. So it's like a form, like you start off, you're in some position like point A, which you didn't know was going to be provisional. Like you started off, you're going to have lunch with your friend, and by the end of the luncheon, you found out something you didn't know before, and your friend has opened up to you, or your friend is crying, or there's something by the end of the story that you didn't expect with the beginning. There are very short piano pieces by Chopin, for instance, that the prelude, some of them are only a page long, and they are so exquisite. And when they come to the final chord, it's just such a beautiful piece of music. If you're a pianist, you can sort of move toward that ending. If it's a piano sonata that's much longer, it's enormously much more difficult to imagine. Or a symphony, is really very long and complicated. But a little prelude by Chopin, the slow ones, you're going to be moving toward that very delicate ending that is just the perfect ending. It's not bombastic, it's not pretentious, it's just this delicate ending. And so too with a miniature narrative, you don't have an ending where there's an earthquake or there's a bomb falls or somebody comes in with a machine gun, You're not going to have an ending that's a violent, melodramatic event. It's probably just some little quiet thing.